Hi, so let's start with understanding the problem statement first. We have to build a habit tracker app. So it's going to be like any habit tracker app in which we have to create a new habit. And then we have to, for every day, we have to mark whether we have done it or not done it. And if we don't mark it by default, that day will be none. Okay. So this app has to be built using Node.js and EJS. And the feature is going to be, yeah, we can add multiple habits like reading book or anything else, and then track each habit every day. Each habit can have three status: done, not done, and none. There will be a view which shows all the current habits that we have, and also an option of adding a new habit. A habit can, for each habit, there should be a view which displays 7 days of each habit. So that shows the user, that user can also go back and change the status of last 7 days if needed, or last 6 days. Also, we can see the other days, I would say, of the habit. A user can then toggle between the three states that we have, either mark it as done, not done, or null. Also, the previous day status should also be changed. We should be able to track the longest streak of the habit, the number of days we have completed that habit since the start. Hi, this is Habit Tracker app that has been deployed online. It has very basic functions like you can add new habit to it, like let's say jogging. So once you add this, this will be displayed on the homepage itself, and where you can do a few things like you can delete it. If you click on cancel, it will not be cancelled. It will not be deleted. If you click on OK, it will be deleted. This is using fetch AJAX API. So what's happening is there's a partial loading in the page. The entire page is not loading up for this delete function. So this is the functionality that we have used. For this, we are going here. All the last 6 days of the habit are there. It can have three state, either none, or it can be done, or it can be marked as not done. Everything that we do will be saved in our DB. This again uses a fetch API, so not and the entire page is loading up. You can go previous and do the same thing for any one of the date, and this will be stored in the DB whatever we do. So we can go back, and then we have the streak and the maximum streak. Everything is over here. Let's understand what Node.js is. So Node.js is, if you have to run JavaScript code, earlier you could only do it on browser. Like browser has the Chrome, like Chrome has V8 JavaScript engine. So all the browser come up with different JavaScript engine. Most popular one is V8, and to run JavaScript code, you need the JavaScript engine which is in the browser. What if you want to run the JavaScript code on your system, not on the browser, let's say on a server, right? For that, we need Node.js. So Node.js allows us to run JavaScript without the use of the JavaScript, the browser JavaScript engine. Okay, so this is Node.js. Then we have Express. So what is Express? So in Node.js, we can create server, and then we can use the proper HTTP response, request response cycle that we have. But using Express, those things become simpler. So Express is a framework, a Node.js framework, which already has a lot of the code pre-written. Like to create a server, you would not have to write a lot of code that you have to do in Node.js. Some of the functionality will be easier. Yes, so let's start building a project. So first thing we'll do is we'll start small. We'll start building getting the required files that we need. We'll start with a node project. So first thing that we need to do is we need to initialize a node project. So it's npm init. So npm is the package manager for Node, and we are saying initialize a Node project. Whenever you download a Node, you'll have to download Node.js, and when you download Node.js, npm will come by default. For all the installation, we'll be using npm. So this will initialize a project for us. We can change these values if we want, but I'm keeping it same for now. It will create a package.json file. Have a index.js file created for now. Okay, and now we'll try to also download the Express app, which is going to be a framework, Node framework. So npm I Express. So then we can import Express from Express. To use this kind of import, we need to make the package.json type as module. So over here, you need to type and then you need to give it module type. Then only you'll be able to use import. So otherwise it throws an error. So we have used it and it will not throw an error. Let's have an app created. So const app, and let's initialize an Express app. Then we can, let's say, use a get method. So whenever we have this route click, we can serve it something like request and response. And then it will, let's say, we'll say respond that send hi connected, something like that. Okay, we'll change it. Definitely we'll change it once we go ahead. And now we'll have to create something which so that we can listen on. Okay, so app dot listen, let's give it a port number 3000, and then what it will do is it will simply connect to the app, and then console log server is running at port 3000. Okay, so if everything goes fine, it should work. Okay, so let's see if it's working or not. So node and the file name index. Okay, so server is running. It says, let's check if it's, yeah, so hi connected. So it's working fine. Okay, Now what we need to do is we would also need to connect to our MongoDB database. So let's connect to the database. How we can connect to the database? So for that, let's create a folder called config, where we'll have the configuration, all the configuration. For now, we are going to connect to the MongoDB database. So we'll write mongoose, let's say mongoose config.js. Okay. Now we'll have to install Mongoose. So npm I mongoose. Once it's installed, we can write import mongoose from mongoose. Okay, so now we should be able to, let's write a function where we can connect to the MongoDB database. Okay, so let's say connect to DB. Okay, this function will be asynchronous. Why? Because we'll wait for it to connect, right? Asynchronous, and then we'll simply, what we'll do is we'll use the mongoose dot connect, and we'll pass the URL that we want to connect to, and yeah, that's it. Once we are connected, we can console.log that connected to MongoDB. Okay, and we can wait for it to connect. So we'll write await over here, and over here we'll pass the URI, the DB URI link that we have, so that you can copy from the copy string. Okay, so yeah, you should have the MongoDB Compass installed in your system. It would make things easier. What we'll do is we'll export this over here. Exporting it would be better so that we can use it. Okay, so this is here. What we can do is we can use it over here. Rather, what we can do is we can create one more file which we'll call server.js, which will, the only purpose of it will be to connect to the server. Okay, so for that we'll need the app over here. So let's export default app. Okay, and then we'll import it over here. So import app from, where do we import it from? From index.js. Okay, and then we can simply have it over here. We'll paste it over here. Okay, so but before running the server, we would want to connect to DB. So we'll do import again, and then we'll import our connect to DB. Yes, we'll call it over here. So connect to DB. We'll call this function over here, and we should be able to connect. We'll also wait for it to connect, and since we are using await, we'll have to make this function as async. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I'm able to get the same thing, and I'm also connected to MongoDB. EJS is embedded JavaScript. It's a template language that lets us generate HTML markup language with plain JavaScript. It's commonly used with Node.js application to create dynamic web pages. It helps us in accessing a lot of the variable and the array or anything that we have in a server on the front end, on the HTML page. So a dynamic content can be loaded with help of EJS. We'll see how it works. Mongoose again is ODM, object data modeling. This is a library for MongoDB and Node.js. It helps us easier to interact with MongoDB server, and we can make new collections. We can query them very effectively and very easily using Mongoose. We are sending a text to the page, but let's rather render a HTML page. So to do that, we'll use the template engine, which is called EJS. So npm I EJS will install it first, and then we can set the app view engine as EJS. View engine as EJS. It's important to do this because then we'll not have to explicitly tell the app that we are using EJS as the view engine by giving it as the extension. It will by default know it. For the app to use the send pages, we'll have to create views. This is where the app by default, the EJS by default looks for all the HTML pages that will have the EJS pages. So then we'll have index.ejs extension where we can write HTML code. So for now, we can write hi connected. Okay, and then we can serve this page by rendering it. So response.render, and then we'll write index, which is the name of the thing that we are rendering, and then we'll pass. Okay, we can leave it like that, and we can close this. So this should be able to. Okay, there's something wrong, and we have missed this. So you can see it's rendering the page. So let's try to create a structure for our app. So you already see I've just created a directory called features. Now this feature can have a lot of features, like let's say I have to log in, log out, and add new users. So I'll have a special directory inside features called users, and that user will have its own DB connection, its own module, its own controller, repository, and routes. Then again, if I want to add one more feature to our app, which is the most important feature, that's habit, obviously. So for habit, everything that's related to habit, how we are adding the new habit, how we are updating, removing, that all can come inside the habit directory. So this way, inside feature, let's create habit. So this will hold, for now it's the only feature that we have, but we'll have later on, we can have more of it. So inside habit directory, we can create a file called, let's say, habit dot schema .js. So what will this have? Let's first try to create the schema, the how we are going to store the data in RDB for habit that we have. So in order to create a schema, we need to import Mongoose. Okay, and now what we can do is create the schema. So to create the schema, let's call the schema habit schema, and then this will be Mongoose dot schema, and then we pass on the object that we have. So we can have the field as name, which will be of the type string. So name of the, and it should be important, so without it we should not be able to create the document. So true, it's needed. And then what we can have is, we also need a streak, right? So to create a streak, we can have type as number, and all the habit by default should have some value of streak, which is 0. And then we can also have, let's say, max streak. This also would be same as this, it would be of type number, and by default it should be 0. Then we can also have days done. Okay, this again should be of type number, and by default, and the start days done should be 0. Then the most important part comes is how we are going to store which all day what all action has been done. So what is the status for each day? So for that, we can create an array, and we can store the date of a date and what was the status on that date. So we can store it as an object. So let's create, let's say, a status field, which will be an array, and this array will store object with the field date, and date will be of the type date, and by default we'll have date as something like date.now, so the present date. Okay, and then we can have also another field called state, and the state will by default be of type string, and we can keep it as nm, and the state can have these values done, and then we can also have not done, and by default we'll have none. Okay, so we can give it a default value of none. So this is how it will be. So you see, it will be, each status will be an object. Okay, the first value will be date, which will key will be date, which will have a date, and then on that date, what was the status? Was it done, not done, or none? Okay, now we'll also be needing this schema elsewhere, so we'll export it. Then we can add another file to our habit feature, which is habit.repository.js. Now this repository file is used to have interaction with the schema. So whatever we are going to do, all the models that will build on top of the habit schema will be, and all the function that will be directly connecting with the having a connection with the DB, all the operations that will be done on the habit schema, that will be done through habit.repository.js file. Okay, so first thing that we need to do over here is we'll have to import the schema, right? So import habit schema, and we'll have to write the extension as .js, and then we can create a model. So let's create a model. To create a model, let's say we'll call it habit, and then what we do is we pass mongoose. For that, we'll have to import mongoose. So import mongoose, and it has a function called mongoose.model, and then we have to pass it the name of the collection. So we'll say habit. Okay, and even if it was a caps, what mongoose does is it looks for this in the DB. Okay, with a small letter h, and then it adds h to it. Okay, if it's not there, it creates it, otherwise it just does the operation on that. So the caps doesn't matter, and by default it will attach an s while creating a collection in the database. Then also we'll have to pass the schema so that it can create, or it can refer it to create the new collection. Okay, so now let's try to interact a bit with our database. Let's see how we can do that. So first of all, we'll have to add a habit. Okay, so let's write a function which will add an habit. So let be const add habit, and this will take some data, we'll pass it on, and then what it's going to do is it will add that data to the habit. So what it will do is it will first of all create the habit. So let's do const new habit, and then what we are going to do is we are going to create a new habit. So basically this model is nothing but a constructor, and it constructs new document. So we are passing the new, and we'll have to give the object that we want to create. So whatever we want to create, so whatever the data is, we are going to give it to it. Okay, and this will create and create a new habit, but we'll also have to save it in our database. To save it, we have to do new habit dot save. Okay, so now save, it might take some time, right, to save. It's an operation where we are interacting with our DB, so it's better to wait for it. Okay, it's a promise. We'll wait for it to get fulfilled. Okay, and whenever you are using await, we can only use it in asynchronous function, so we'll have to write the keyword async over here. Okay, and it's a good practice to always have try and catch for async and await function, so that if there's any error while it is getting saved, while the operation is getting done, then it's going to catch. So it's good practice to have while dealing with promises. So it's going to catch that error, and then we can pass on the error. Okay, so let's say we can return it. So success in this case would be, let's say, false, and message that we are going to send is the error message. Okay, in this case, what we are going to do, we'll send success as true, that okay, this has been added, and the message, we can save the message, send the message as the new habit that was created. Okay, so in order to use it, let's do one thing. We can export it, and for now, just to test it, let's use it over here. So first let's try to import it. So import new habit. Oh, it was add habit, and let's try to use it over here. So we'll pass a name as running. So this will create a new habit for us called running. Also, we'll have to wait because it's a DB operation, so let's wait for it to finish and then store the result in a response variable, and then we can console log to see if everything is working. Okay, okay, so it was successfully done and it has been created. Default is this, status would be empty, and you also see a ID field that we didn't create, but Mongoose by default creates it, an ID field to keep track of everything uniquely. Okay, this we'll be using it later. We can also go and check in our DB if everything is fine. So we can refresh it and see here a new document has been added, which is okay. Now we know how to add habit. We'll also have to create a function to get a habit by ID. That's also going to be very important while we are implementing our project. So to do that, let's write a function called get habit by ID. And what it will do is we'll pass it an ID to it, and then it should return us the habit. So first thing it will do is it will query the model that we have. So, and it will store it into the habit. So this habit will be equal to the habit model dot find one. So either you can use find one or find by ID. Okay, so in find one, what we have to give is we have to give a filter, and all the filter takes a document, an object. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to say find the ID. Okay, so this is what it's going to do, and then what we are going to do is if that habit is found, if that ID habit by that ID is found, then it will be not null. In that case, we'll return it. If it is null, then also we'll have to check. If it's not null, then we'll have to return again the success will be true for this operation, and the message would be our habit that we got. And in case it's not the case, if we have got null, then the success should be false. We didn't get it right, and the message could be habit with given ID not found. Okay, and again, this, if you see over here, this is going to be a DB operation, and when we come over here, it might be null. By the time it feeds it, it's again a promise. By the time it returns results to a value, it will, the command, the line of execution would be here, and it will be null till then. So we'll wait for it to resolve. So we'll use await, and while using await, we'll have to also use async over here as the function. Okay, and while we are using async await, we should always put it in try and catch, so that we catch all the error. If there is any error in between, we get it. So I'm putting it in try and catch. Okay, and we'll catch the error, and we'll again, if there's any error, we'll return it as false, and the message would be the error that we got. Okay, now one of the thing is that we'll have to, let's test it. So over here, let's write export, and we'll go to the server again. Now we have already tested it, so I'm removing it, and now we have to test it. So let's get that function over here, which was get habit by ID. Okay, so let's have this in a response object again, and let's call this function get habit by ID. And what we have to pass is, we'll pass the ID over here. So for that, let's go to the Mongo, and let's copy this. Okay, now if we pass this string over here, this is going to go over here, and then it's going to go to the repository where we have this function, and it's going to be something like this. It's going to be the ID that we have passed. It's going to be something like look for this ID field and whatever the string that we have passed, the long string. But if you see closely over here, we don't have any ID field, but rather we have underscore ID field. So let's change that to underscore ID over here, and over here also has underscore ID. So now it will look like something like this, underscore ID and this. Okay, we can also console log underscore ID. Okay, so whenever this ID will come, this find one will take this object underscore ID equal to whatever we have passed, and it will look into the model. Okay, also you see that we have over here this string over here, and we do not have this object ID, this object. But by default, Mongoose will look for this, and we do not need to convert it. In case you want to convert it, then it's doable. And how to convert it is we'll have Mongoose dot types dot object ID, and then you pass whatever you have to convert. And for that, obviously, you'll have to import Mongoose over here, but we'll not do it because anyways, it's going to work. Okay, let's see what happens. And again, this is a DB operation. We'll wait for it to finish, and then we'll console dot log the response. Okay, hopefully, let's see what happens. Okay, so it says that it didn't work. Let's see why. So this ID is not present, it says. So let me refresh it again. And why is it not present? It is present, right? So let me check again in the repository. So if there is no habit, okay, it should be if habit, my bad. Yeah, now it did return something, it looks like. Okay, so it's returning us the data. So guys, I forgot to record update habit function. So after that, we are going to create update habit. This will take ID, date, and the state. We need three things to update a habit. What is the ID, which habit we have to update, which date of that habit we have to update, and what we have to update with the new state. Okay, the first thing we are going to do is we are going to fetch that habit. If the habit is present, then well and good. Otherwise, we are going to return false, habit not found. Then what we are going to do is we are going to find which date we have, and if we have that date or not, the date that we have got inside the habit. For that, we are going to query the habit.status array. We are going to use dot find operation. Dot find takes a testing function which returns true or false. If it returns true for an object, the first item that satisfies it, it will return that item. It will return that object. If there is no item which satisfies this condition, it will return null. Okay, so it's looking for item.date, and we are going to convert this date which to a date string. Why? Because this date object is going to have time as well by default, the way we are storing it. But we are not concerned about the time. We just want a date. One date would have one state, right? If it was done or not. So we are converting it to just date. We are removing the time. And again, the date that we have got in the function, that also we are converting it to date string, and then we are matching. If it matches, we are returning the object. That object will be date, and the state both will return that item, which is stored in the habit.status array. If the date is not present, if that object is not present, in that case, we are going to create a new object for it. Why? Because we have to update a habit, right? So we create date and state. By default, the state is going to be whichever state that we have got it from there. Okay, and then we are going to push it in the status array. If this object is already present, if this day is already present, for that day we are going to change that state to the new state that we have got. Okay, then for streak also we would want to make some changes. For done, we would want to increase the streak and all. At the end, we would also want to save whatever we have got. So we'll save the habit. Right now, whatever changes we are making over here in line number 39, that's going to be made in the actual habit, because it's a reference to the actual habit.status, that is. But we have to save it also to the DB. So at the end, we save it. So now that we have created this function, let's try and test it. So again, we'll go to this, and we'll pass a date of today. And let's first get the function over here. The function was called as update. Was it update habit? Okay, where was it? It's in here, update habit, right? Okay, and over here, let's call update habit. What all we need to pass? We need to pass the ID. Okay, so let me get the ID also here, and we can get the ID for now from here. So let's copy the ID. And so we pass the ID, we pass the date, and we pass the state as, let's say, done. And we'll return we'll store the response in here, and we'll console log this. Since it's an asynchronous function, we'll wait for it to finish. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, so one of the reasons why it was not showing up there in autocomplete was because we didn't export it. So let's try again. And we got it, it seems. Yeah. So it's not an empty status that you see, right? So if we go here and refresh the DB, we'll see So it has been done. Since it was a new date, so a new date was added. So if I try to, let's say, run it again, but mark it as not done, let's first see the schema. So it's not done, not done. Okay, so we can go again and check. It should be not done. Okay, what if we made some error? Let's deliberately make some error. Let's make it 9. Then the catch statement should be able to catch it. So this habit is not found since there was no error over here. But if we create a error over here, let's do this, which is not allowed. So it failed. The reason was because we have passed it as an and state can't be only, it can only take 3 things. So this is our habit update habit function, which is working fine. Okay, so now we have created a function to add new habit, to get an habit by ID, and also update a habit. But everything that we are doing is we are doing it from the server, but we would want the user to have the access of adding new habit from the client side, from the browser, and also updating habit. So let's start with adding new habit. In this, what we want is in the first page, we'll have a link which the user can click, and it will take us to a form where the user can add new habit. And this page will also list all the habit that the user has, and this will be a clickable link, hyper text, and when it's clicked, it is going to take up to a detailed view that will do. But the first step is to create this page where we have this functionality. Okay, so I have done small changes to the repository function. I have added repo at the end of all the function, because now we'll be creating a controller function, and all the controller function would be similar, and they'll be calling the repository function, just the name would not have the repo in it. Also, one function that I have added is get all habit by repo. So what it does is it finds all the habit, it returns the habit, and in case of error, it returns the error. Okay, so now we can start. So now we would want to have a controller function as well. Why? Because our repository functions are not going to deal with the router. Okay, we are going to create router as well, which will be connected to the path. So let's first create the controller function. So habit.controller.js. This will be dealing with all the request and response cycle. It will be rendering pages on the client side, and it will be interacting with our repository function. So first thing that we need is let's try to handle a case where we are sending the response with the add new habit link, and also list down all the habit that we have right now. So we'll call this get all habit function. Okay, and again this will be a const, and then this has to be a async function. Why? Because it will be dealing with the database to get all the habits that we have. So this function, in this function, we'll be calling the function that we have created in the repository, which is get all habit by repo, get all habit repo. So let's first import it. So import get all habit repo.js, and we'll just call this function. So const response, and we'll get all habit repo. Okay, now we'll wait for this function to finish. It's a promise, so we'll wait for it to resolve, and we'll check if response.success is there. Then we'll render response.render, we'll render index.ejs. Okay, otherwise what we'll do is we'll do response else, we'll do response.send. Let's say we'll send the response dot message for now. Okay, which will have the error. Okay, and this should be res and res. Okay, now with index we also want to send all the habit that we have, so that we can list it on the page. So how do we get the habit? Okay, let's get all the habit here. So let's call it const, and we'll have to get the request and response object over here. So habits, and we'll get it from resp dot message. This has all the habits. We send it in a object. Okay, so this is it, and let's go to the EJS file where we create an HTML doc, and we'll have a head which will have a title, and this title will have habit tracker as the name. Also we'll have body. In the body we can have a heading which is called as habit tracker, and then we can have the button, the anchor tag, which will take us to somewhere where we can fill the new habit. So add new habit, and also we'll need to list all the habits that we have. Okay, so to list all the habits, let's do this. We'll get all the habits dot for each habit h, we are going to do this. Let's close this, and for each habit h we are going to create an anchor tag a. Let's call it, we'll pass a path later, but the name would be, the value of this would be h dot name of the habit. Okay, let's see if this is working or not. Okay, it won't, we can't see it right now. Why? Because we have the controller function, but how is it going to reach the controller function? That is going to happen through the route that we are going to create. So for that, let's create a file over here, habit.route.js, and over here we'll import the function that we have in the controller function so that we can call it. But for that, we'll have to export it from here. Get all habit. So import get all habit.js. Also, we'll have to create a router, and that can be only done if we have Express over here. So import Express from Express, and then now let's create the router object, and this router object will come from Express dot router. Now for this router object, we'll have route. Let's create a route for this. Whenever this comes for get request, then we'll pass this function get all habit. This will handle this route. Okay. Now let's export this route, export default, so that we can use it in our index.js file. Okay, since we are doing a default export, which is only one, which can only be one in the entire file, so we can name it as anything. Not, we don't have to import like import router from there. We can name that router as anything because it's a default export import, sorry. So we can import, well, we can call it router habit in case in future we want to have more routers for more features. So import router habit from, we'll have the features, and then we have habit, and then from there we'll have habit router.js. Okay, we will use a middleware. Whenever a path this comes, you send it to the router habit. This will handle this. So this is all sorted. Let's see if it throws any error or it's working. So okay, there is some error that we have. Let's see what it is. Okay, so in controller we have over here habits. Hopefully no more error. Okay, so it's kind of working. It's coming in one line which we can fix. Let's fix this in here. Let's have a ul, and every one of this will be a list element. Let's wrap it in a list and close the ul. Since it's a EJS change, we don't need to restart a server, and here it is. So we'll not work much on CSS, but this is how it is. If we click this, it should go to a page where we can add a new habit. This should take us to a page where we can add the details. Now that we have rendered this, let's try and create a habit detail page. So for this to take us to the detail page, the running ID, the running habit that we have. So this is the running habit DB. This is how it looks in the DB. It has a name running, which is mapped by a ID, unique ID, and then we have the dates. Each date is unique and has a state mapped to it. So in order to list all the habit detail, what we need is we need to know where to start listing the date from, because a DB can have, let's say, 100 of date and state, right? But we need to start and stop. Okay, well, let's say we will list only 6 dates, and but where to start listing the date from, right? So we'll have this schema as like architecture as well. We have the date and a habit ID in order to get the detail. So let's say if the date starts from there, then the next 6 or 7 dates will be getting based on the ID that we have provided. Now let's add a route for it. So we'll call this route as habits, and we'll have to give ID so that we know which habit we are talking about, which habit detail we want, and we'll also need the date. So it should be h dot underscore ID, and we'll need the date detail. But how do we get the date over here? For that, we can by default take today's date, okay, whichever is the today's date, and the previous 6 habit detail will be displayed by default when a user clicks on it, right? We would want the user to go to the today's date. So let's get the today's date from the controller. Here we'll get the today's date. In order to get the today's date, we'll create a constant today date, and we'll get the date as date.now, which returns date and time object in millisecond. This is the exact instance that we are getting, and we'll pass this today date inside our template, and we'll be using it while rendering. So whenever a route is clicked, the today date will be always shown. This showing the status of today date, and let's say previous few days status will be shown. So let's add it over here. Today's date. We'll now have to create a route for it. So route whenever the path habits and habit ID, which is equal to ID, and date. This route is clicked for the get request. Then in that case, we'll call the function, the handler that we have created, which is get habit detail by ID. We'll also have to add this handler in the controller function. So that this is the get all habit. Now Now to create get habit detail by ID, we need few things, right? First, we'll try to list all the habit detail for each day starting from today. Okay, so whatever the date is today, and then we'll backtrack and we'll list, let's say, 5 or 6 days. Okay, so let's say if the date is 8, then we'll list 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and 2. But you know that all there's a possibility that we'll not have all these dates stored in our DB. There could be a case when all of them are not stored in our DB. Okay, why? Because we are not storing all the days. We are only storing the days that the user has input, right? So if you see over here we have 8, if you see over here we have 7, but we don't have any detail for 6. But we don't want that. We want to give the user all the detail. If there's nothing, we would want to give it as none the status, so that he can toggle the state for that day as well if he wants to toggle for 6. So for that, we'll have to generate these detail. What else we'll need with date? With date, we'll also need the state. First thing we'll need to check is we'll have to generate these days from today, and let's say 6 days back. We'll generate all these days, and for all these date, we'll check in a DB if this date exists or not. Okay, if the date exists, then it's okay, and if it doesn't, then we'll have to create that date, and we'll have to show it in the page. So we'll create an array which will have date and state. If it's present in DB, we'll get it from DB, the date and state. Otherwise, we'll create an object, and for that date, by default, we'll create a none. Okay, so also while we are checking the date, we'll try to check only the date part of it, not the time. We'll only compare if the state part of it exists in the DB or not, and then we'll try and get that date. So if we want to get a date, if we want to get a date, then how can we get a date? We have to do one thing is that we'll need a starting date. We'll need the number of days we want to backtrack, and also we would want these things first, right? The start date and the count, and also which habit we have to change the status array of, right? This is a status array of a habit. We would want to know which habit we are changing. So what we want is the start date and the number of day we want to generate this array, and which habit we are changing it to, so that we can look into that habit status array and we can find if that date exists or not. So 3 things are needed. Okay, so let's start with the creating it. So habit detail. So first thing is we'll get the ID for the habit. So const underscore ID. We'll get it from the parameter. We'll pass it into the parameter. Then we would want to get the date from the parameter. Now this date which we are going to get from the parameter is going to be a integer again, right? We are storing it in milliseconds, the date which is coming from the parameter. So we'll pass the string that we are getting, the millisecond string, to integer, and this we are going to get from params.date. Okay, and we are creating a date object for it. Why? Because this is a string. We pass it to int, then we get the millisecond, and now out of it we'll create the date. Okay, now what we need to do is we'll query for this habit, whereas we'll get the habit from the repository. So we'll call the repository function over here, which is get habit by ID repo. Okay, do we have it over here? Oh, this is the function that we have. So, and for this we'll have to pass the ID, and we'll pass the ID over here. If this is a valid ID and the response is successful, then we'll do some things. We'll get the habit from this. So response will have a message, right? Response.message, and we'll store it in habit. Okay, and now we'll store it in habit, and now let's create the days array that we want, right? Or the days array or the status array. Right. To create the status array, we'll create a function which is generate. Okay, so this is the function that we are looking for. We'll create the generate status array, which will generate these date for us, backtracking the number of days that we want. Okay, so for this, let's create a function first. So export function generate days, and we'll call it generate end days. It will generate the number of days we want. And what is it going to take? It's going to take the start date that we are starting, and then it's going to take the number of days we want to create the array for. It will backtrack from there and it will create those days, and then we'll pass it the habit. Okay, so now since we have this, let's first create the array. So we'll call it status array, and this will be empty, and then we'll loop it starting from 0, and I is less than count. We'll increment I, and then we'll create a new date for it. For each of these days going back, we'll create a new date. So this will be date. First, let's convert it to date and start date. So here we'll have new. Why we are doing it? Because even if we are getting a date object over here, we'll create a new date out of it. Otherwise, it will reference the same date that we are talking. Because it's an object, it will reference the same date, and it will keep changing the same date. But every time we are inside the loop, we would want a new date. Okay, a new object. So we are creating a new object over here. So this is important. Even if the start date is already a date object, we'll have to convert it again. Okay, now what we are going to do, we are going to take this new date and we'll set the date of this new date. First, how are we going to set? We are going to take the start date and just get the date part of it. We are not concerned about the time. Okay, and minus I. So initially it will be the same date. Minus 1 will have give us a date previous 1 day before. Similarly, it will go 2 day before, and so on. Then we'll create a const array. We'll create a day, which will be, first it will do habit and habit.status that we have. And in this, we'll use the find function that we have. Now this find function, as we know, the find function, what it does is it finds the element that we are looking. If it's satisfied, we have to give a testing function to it. Then it returns the first element that passes the test. Otherwise, it returns a null. Okay. So in this find, we'll pass the testing function as, let's say, for each day in the status array that we have, we'll see this d.date, and then we'll just take the date part of it. So we'll convert to date string because it also has time. We just are comparing the date part of it. And then we'll compare it with the new date that we have. Is this date already present, the new date that we have created? Okay. If then again, this will also parse it to string just the date we need. That's how we are going to compare. If it is, we'll get the date and the status, that object that we have, the date and the status for it. D will be returned. If it's not there, in that case, if it returns null, in that case, what we want to do is we want to create a new object which will have the date as new date, and the state of it is going to be none. Why? Because it was not there and we want to show it on our page. We want it to be there so that user can take action. So this is how we are going to do. Okay, once this is done, we'll push this in our status array. We'll push this day object that we have got in our status array, and at the end we'll return the status array. Now we'll get the status array from here. We'll say generate end days, and what we are going to give, we are going to give it a start date. Okay, and where do we have the start date? This date, the date that we have got from the parameter. Then we are going to ask it to get the last 6 days. So count will be 6, and we are going to pass it the habit. Okay, once this is done, we'll render it into the habit detail .ejs with what? With the habit that we have and the days status array that we have created. So this will be rendered. If we were not able to get the habit, then in that case, we'll just console.log the response message, which will be an error. So now let's create the habit detail page. So for that, let's go to the views. So HTML, head, title, and now let's create the body. So in our habit detail, we'll get the habit. So let's first get the habit name. So it will be habit.name. And now we can display all the statuses that we have of the habit. So we can, let's go to the controller to see status array that we have. So for each habit that we have over here, we can display the name and other detail for each, right? For, let's say, for date, for each date that we have, let's close this and close this. And for now, let's have them in paragraph tag. So this will be the date, and for each date we are going to also have the status, state of it. Okay, so this looks fine and this should work. Let's see if everything is fine. Let's once again check the route. So yeah, this is good. Okay, there's something wrong with array.for. Okay, so we'll have to first go to the index page. Okay, it's an EJS chain, so we can just reload. It's working fine. Let's see. So this is showing an error. So count is not defined. Okay, makes sense. In the controller, we have count, which is not defined. So let's have const count as 6. We can dynamically change it if we want 6 or 7 or anything else. So it's good. We are not hard coding it. Now let's see if it works now. Okay, there's some issue with the closing tag. Let's go to the detail page and over here. So if you can see here, 987654, it's working fine. Okay, now we have this, but we would want to toggle the state as well. So we'll learn we'll see how we can do the toggling so that we can change it from done to not done and none. We want to toggle the state from done to not done. So let's create a button out of it first. So first thing is we'll go into the EJS file, and over here let's create a button. So this we can wrap it in a button. So button, and the button, this will be over here. Now let's give this button. Okay, let's give this button. We'll need on click of the button. We'll need to do something, right? So on click function. Let's call it toggle button. Now this part that we are doing right now, what we are going to do is we are going to toggle the button and then get the new state of it, right? So let's see what we want. So first of all, we have a date. So we have a date, we have a habit ID, and we have a date, and then we have a state. So in order to change the state of this date of this habit ID, I need the habit ID and the date I want to change the state of, right? So I would need habit ID and the state, date of the state I want to change, and what state it is actually, so that I can, based on it, I can change the state. So if the state is current done, so by default I can say next would be not done. If it is not done, the next would be, let's say, none. If it is none, the next would be by default done whenever it's click none. So we need three things: habit ID, date, and the state of it in order to implement this toggling. Also, we do not want to reload the entire page when we are doing it, when we are changing it. So we just want, let's say we are changing the state of this, so we do not want the entire page to load. We just want the state of it to change. So partial loading we want, which we can get using AJAX fetch API. And if you want to learn in depth this function only, especially this function, the state button state manager, I have created in Node.js to explain this detail, and there's a video in the link that you can look, and it will help you understand this better. Although even if you don't watch it, you'll be able to follow it. So okay, so we have this done over here, and we have this toggle button. So toggle button, as I said, will take the date and the habit that we have, habit ID, so that it can get the habit which is there. And we also need the state, but once we have the habit ID, we can get the habit detail from our DB, right? So we'll need to pass it the date. So it is going to be the dot date, and we'll also need to pass it we have the habit dot id, so that we can have a look. Okay, so now let's write a function over here only. Let's write a script, and we'll define the toggle function. So function toggle button, and now this toggle button is going to be fetch something, right? So this is going to fetch something from the DB. So we should have this as async function, okay, so that we can wait for it to finish. And this toggle function will have date and the habit ID. Okay, now what it will do, it will first, let's see if it's getting that or not. Console log date and habit ID, if we are getting it or not. Okay, and we can check something like that. So it's throwing us an error missing this after an argument. Okay, this happens because of this. We'll have to put this in quotes and individual quotes over here. This also and this also. So remember, whenever you're passing this, it has to be in quotes over here. Otherwise, you'll get that error. Although we don't need to start the server. Let's refresh it once. So yeah, I'm able to get the habit ID and the date. Cool. So we have the habit ID and the date. So let's create a fetch. So what we'll do is we are going to update the database now. How we are going to update? Whatever date that we have over here and whatever habit ID that we have, for that we'll toggle the state of that habit. Let's see if we already have something over here or not. So this is the update habit repo that we have, which takes ID, date, and the state. Okay, and so it finds the ID. If it's not, it returns that. Okay, well, good enough. And then it finds the day state. Okay, so what we want, we have the ID, and next we want to find out the state. So for that day, if there's any database or present, if the date, so let's say for 7th, if it's present in DB or not, we'll have to check, right? Because this is coming from the status array that we generated. There could be a chance that the 7 is not present in our DB, right? So we'll have to check. So this is what we are doing over here. If it is not present, then what we want? If it's not present, then we want it, we'll push it in our DB. And the state for this would be what? The state would be null, none. Okay. So if it's not present, we know it's going to be none. But yeah, if it's not present, we know it's going to be none. But when we are clicking on, let's say it's already none, right? If it's not present, it's none. When you click it, then the next it should go is done. Okay, we'll only get this when there's a request for update. So we'll update from none to done. Okay, and then push it in the habit status dot this. We'll push this. Now, otherwise, if it is present, Okay, now if it's present, if the ID is already present, for that let's write a case statement. So switch, so day dot state day dot state, and day dot state would be and the dot state. So we'll write it on this. Okay, and this will only be done if it's otherwise, if it's not present, because for not present we have already taken care of, we have already changed the status from none to done and we have pushed it. So if it's not present, then case one, when let's say the day dot state is, let's say, none, in that case what we want is, we'll change it to, let's create a new thing called state. We do not need this, we'll get it from our habit only. We'll call it let state a new, and this state would be equal to, what? It will be equal to from none, let's make it to done. That's what we have made. And then after this we'll have to break it, otherwise it will go to the next case by default. If it is done, then make it as not done, and we'll break it, and by default it will be null. There could be a chance, there could be a case where we have none present in our DB also. Okay, if we toggle it again and again, it's present. It will not come under this, but it will be present. So in that case, we'll change the state to be from none. If it's okay, non done and not done, from not done it should become none. No need to break from here. So we have this ready over here. Okay, and what we want to do is, in here only we would want to change the habit dot status. Okay, sorry, day state dot state. The state will change it to the new state that we have calculated. Okay, so the new state that we have calculated, this will be okay. And at the end, irrespective of anything, even if it is not there, then we have pushed it, and if it's there, we have just changed that. Again, it is going to, when we are fetching this, it is generating a reference to that object. Okay, sorry, over here it's generating a reference to that, the address of that object is present over here. So while we are doing day dot state, the actual object would be getting changed, and not only this variable over here that we have created. Okay, so the actual object will be changed, and once we have this, we can save the habit. So habit, okay, let's in fact save it at the end. We already are saving it seems. Okay, so this will update the habit, and after updation, what it's already returning us a habit. So instead of returning it a habit, let me return habit dot, let me return it the day state dot state, which is the new state that we have calculated. Okay, so let us return this. This is what we want from the toggle function. We would want to get this. Okay, so now this toggle function will need a route and a controller. So we have ID, let's call it export, update habit. It's going to take a request, response, and then it's going to query. Okay, from the response, from the request, we want to take two things. One is what is needed, the ID and the date. Okay, params. Okay, so ID and the date. Also, let's create a router for this. So whenever habits ID and date is coming, this will be as a post. Then send it to update habit. What is the function name? Update habit. So we got this update habit over here. Have we got it over here? Okay. So now we'll have it in the params, and so once we have it, we'll pass it and we'll get the response. So const response await. So we'll have to make it async. Update habit repo, and we'll pass the ID and the date. Once we have the response, let's look at the response structure. So success. So if resp.success is true, then we want to do certain things. Else, just return the error message that we have. Okay. In this case, what we want is, we want to return this so that our fetch can use. So we can get the state. We'll be getting the state if there is a success. Okay. So const state is equal to resp.message, and we can send this as a JSON over here. Okay, so we whenever this route is getting played, this function is getting called, it's going to send a JSON object as the state. That's all we need for our toggler. That's all we need from our toggler. Why? First, it has already updated the habit in the DB, and next what it has done is it is going to get us the state so that we can display on a client side also. Okay, the partial display that we were talking about. So let's do const resp response, and then we'll use fetch. We'll wait for the fetch to complete, and we can pass the ID over here. Once again, I have a video on this, so this will be very easy when you see that. So first it will take habits, and then it will have the date, sorry, the ID. So first thing is the ID, and then as per route, we'll send it the date. Okay, and we'll wait for it and console.log the response for now. Let's see if things are working. Let's see if it's working. Okay, so it's returning us a response, but this response is in a weird format, right? Okay, so let's first convert it into a readable format, a JSON format. So const, we'll call it state. It will give us a state. We'll wait for it to happen. So response.json, this will convert it into a JSON format, and then let's console.log state check. So we haven't changed the Node.js file. Okay, unexpected token. It says there's something wrong. First of all, we also have to change it to the type to post, and state. Okay, let's see the router dot post. Okay, so it is returning us an empty object. Let's see why. Controller, let's try to console.log response. So success is false. Why? Because type error. Okay, so this function only works for a date type object. What we are getting over here is a string coming from params, right? So we'll have to convert it to a date object. So date, we can do pass it through this constructor and pass this date. So yeah, so you can see the status is getting changed, unexpected end. Okay, so basically we have to wait for it because it's in promise. So done. Okay, so over here this looks good, and what we need to do is we need to update the client. So to update, we'll have to get an ID. So in ID, what we can do is we have to make it unique. So we can give it a date, d.date. The ID can be like this, and also the habit that we are passing. Okay, so something like habit dot ID. So this will be the ID of our button, and we'll have to pass it in quotes. Okay, so now that we have the ID, we can fetch it over here. So const button will be equal to document dot get element by ID, and then we pass it in backtick. We'll have our dollar date and dollar habit ID. This should get us the element, and now we need to change the button dot element inner text. Okay, and this will be equal to the new state that we got. Remember, the state has already been changed in the DB. We refresh, we'll get the new state, but we also want to change it in the client side. Okay, so since we are not reloading the entire page, so we are doing it. Okay, since again we can reload this over here, and then we can done, not done, and then done, done, not done, done, not done. Okay, let's see. There are sometimes the messages is coming as undefined. Let's see why it's happening. Whenever it's never none is coming, right? So we'll see. Column is with, I think, this the repository function, I would say. So whenever there is a none case, make it done. Whenever there is a done, make it not done. Otherwise, by default, when it's not done, make it none. This is the thing. If you don't find anything, then the date should be status should be done, and you have to push it in the day dot state, day state. Okay, and it's pushed in the day state. This is the day state that we have, and whatever it is, we save this and we get the day state dot state. Okay, what's happening by default? When it's none, it's done. When it's done, it's not done. And when it's not done, it's again none. Okay, okay, sorry. So this is working fine. And even if we reload the page, this is changed into the DB. And there's a partial update that we wanted. So it's working fine now. Now the next thing that we need to do is if we want to load the previous day's data and the next day data, previous 6 days and the next day's data, how can we do that? So we'll think about that now. Now let's try to understand how to get this previous and next feature. Okay. Right now we already have something which is called generate end days function. What it does, it takes the start date and count and the habit and it generates us the detail. By default, when we are going for the first time in the landing page, in the habit detail page, we are passing the start date as today. And then what it does is it is today minus 1, today minus 2, today minus so until 5 or 6 days that we have. So this is something that we already have. And when we click on previous, what we want is we want to reach this state. So if you see this t minus 1 is our starting point and t minus 7 is the starting point of it, or this is the last that we have over here, and the last date minus 1 is the first date for our previous page. So it is same as loading the page again, the habit detail page that we load with a date, but the date this time should be whatever is on our page, the last date minus 1. And when we are loading the next date, then it should be whatever we have in the first plus 6 days. Okay, t minus 1 plus 6 would give us t5 and it will generate this again using the generate end days. Okay, so we can use the function that we already have over here, which is the update, sorry, which is get habit by, where is it? Okay, get all habit. Let's go to the controller function. Okay, so the get habit detail by id is already there. Here we are generating it for today. Okay, the date is today. It is coming from the param that we have today, and that param is defined in the landing page of it to date over here. This today is coming. Rather than today, we just have to pass it a new thing, right? And it will fetch us everything that we need. It will generate us that, and it will do the same thing that we have. So get habit by ID will get us this. Okay, we'll pass the date and this, and it will get us. Okay, but we need to have some buttons over here for previous and for next, and we also need to have a logic which does this calculation, which takes the last date. In case of previous, takes the last date of the page, and in case of next, takes the first date, and then it makes the call. So for that, first of all, let's create a route. First of all, let's create a button. So over here, we'll have it in over here, and then we can have a href. We'll pass it, let's say we'll call it habits, the path habits, and this will be pref. Whenever this is hit, we'll take this to the previous handler, okay, which will do the changes that we were needed. What are the changes that we need on top of it? It will take this, it will be given this date, but then it will rather call the function that we already have with subtracting this date. Okay, so to do these changes, we have a pref route that will define very minimal changes that will do. And then it will take the habit ID. So let's give it the habit ID. And next we need is also the date, which date we have to make the change. So we have the status array over here, and the status array has all the dates we want. For previous, we want the last date. So status array dot length -1. This is what we want. We close it and we send it, and this, and we call it previous days. Okay, and now let's create a route for this. So in the router, we'll have router.route habits, and this will have ID, and then this will have date. Okay, this will also be pref for the previous because it's slightly different for previous for us. And is it going to be a get or a post? It has to be get, and we can pass the same. No, we'll have to pass a new function we'll have to create. So let's create one over here. Okay, so we'll call it export. So what we want to do is we want to previous and next we want to generate. So we can say const get previous habit detail, and this again will be async request response. Okay, so if we'll have the IDs and the date that we'll get from the parent, Now again, this date will be a string object, so we'll have to convert it to a date object. So const, you saw that. Okay. So now the important part is we want, in case of previous, we have already been given the last date, but we want one less than that, right? For the previous, let's see what the requirement was. So we want one less than that, and generate end days would automatically generate these. Okay. So new date that we want is, it's going to be date dot, again we'll change this date. We'll get the date dot get date, and whatever we get we'll have -1. So it will take one previous date, and then what we want to do is, okay, so this is the date that we are given. Let's see what we have to do next. So now you see this, that we what we do is, to get id, this is what we do. And what it does is, we'll pass this function. What it does is, it parse ints. This is the place where we are parsing it to integer. So it means that by default we expect this function expects a integer over here. Okay, that is the millisecond date that we have. Right now the date that we have is not a millisecond. This date is not a millisecond. It's going to be a string one with the Friday, day, and date, year, and the time that we have. So how to convert it into the millisecond? To do that, you just have to, let's say this date is going to be date dot get time. So get time function gives you time in millisecond, which is a number. So this is the number that we want. It is important to get this number, otherwise that function that we already have, the predefined function, will not be able to use it, because at one step we are assuming that the date that we are getting is in millisecond, and this is how we are storing the date in db also, in millisecond. Okay, so now we can call this function over here, or rather than calling this function, what we can do is we can simply redirect also. So response dot redirect, just redirect it to a new path, and this path is going to be habits, and let's pass the date that we have, ids first. So first the id, it has to be this, and then we pass the new date that we created, this date. Okay, and this should work. This will simply go there and it will give us the new date, and then the same thing would happen. So let's see if it's working or not. So this brev. Okay, so we have something happening here, which is failed id. Why is that the case? Habit underscore id, and okay, so this route isn't even converted. So let's first have the function that we wrote. So cast to object id failed for this. Let's see why. So we have this prev, and then we have this id and date, get prev id. id and date. The route is id and date. Here we have id. Okay. Can't get id and date. So we have this id and date. So id and date, habits prev. Okay. So dates are showing invalid. Let's see why. Yeah. So it's not a number. Reason being, okay. Let's see if it's because of const new date. New date. Okay, let's define here only. Date. See, this date is coming a bit weird over here. Okay, so I got the error. So it should not be this, but so this is going to send us the this, but we need to send the date. So we need to send the date of it. So this is 9th and 4th. Okay, some more dot gate is not a function. At least it's returning a date. Okay. So now we have a date, and now it should be new date everywhere. And now I think it should work. Okay, so it's working now. So 23rd, 29th. So it should show from 28th. So 28th and this. Okay. Similarly, we can have the, let's get rid of the console statements. Similarly, we can have the next, get next days. And in get next days, this is what we decided, that will add plus 6 to the first one. Okay. So whatever we get, we'll add plus 6 to it. And we'll be redirecting it again to the same place, just the plus 6. Now we can use this again. Let's create a route for it. Next, where this comes, we'll be using next. We can have it here as well. Okay. And in here we can create this one more button. Now we'll not pass pref, but we'll pass next, and we'll pass it the first element, not the last. We'll call it next. So 10th, 15th, next should be 16th, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So this is working fine. Okay. Right now we are able to change the status of the future dates also. That is something we can change it. It's very easy to change. So these things are done. One thing that is missing is to add new habit if you want. So this thing is missing. Let's work on that now. So to add new habit, let's add a form over here, which will have a submit. On submitting, the new habit will be added and will be redirected back to the same page because it's just one field that we need to add. To have the form, I prefer not writing any HTML, CSS myself. So there's a Bootstrap. So let's use Bootstrap. So form template Bootstrap. So we'll pick anyone from here. Okay, we have quite a lot option over here. So based on which one you like, you can pick one. Okay, this feels like this. We can have some field over here and then the ID. Okay, so I'll copy this and I'll place it over here. We'll obviously need to edit few things, like we do not, what do we need? We don't want this, and input password type we want text. Okay, let's look at it again. Yeah, we want text, whatever it is. Okay, okay, if you want you should actually change it, these things. So this is enter habit, the placeholder should be type habit. Also let's change it to habit name, and ID should also be habit name. Okay, and then we have to submit, which we'll call add habit. Obviously this bootstrap is not going to work. We'll have to connect it to the CDN, right, so that it can use these classes that we have over here. So we'll do that, and to do that you have to add a CDN over here, which is content delivery network. So just to try it out, if you see, we'll see a form, but it's not that beautified, right? So to it to work, we'll have to use CDN bootstrap. And so let's pick this, let's copy everything and place it over here. Okay, so this is how it is. Cross origin, it's important to add this tag. Why? Because now our front end, our client is getting data from another server, which is sitting over here, right? The Bootstrap server. And our backend is on another server. If we do not add this, we might run up into a CRSF error. Okay, so we have to add this. So let's see if it works. Okay, it's looking good. So on submit, we want the form to do some action, right? And the form will do action, and it should send us it to add habit. Okay, it should send it to add habit. And what else we can do is the method we can define. Since we are adding, the method should be post. Also we'll need to add a new route. So router dot route, whenever add, let me check with the, okay, whenever add habit comes, post response, then we'll have add habit. Let's add habit controller. Let's see if we have a function already. Yeah, so what it takes, it stores the data as it is. Okay, so let's have export const add habit, and this will be async again, request response. And first it will read the name from the request dot body dot name. Okay, let's console log request dot body for now and see if we are getting anything. Once we have this, we'll also have send it to the await, and we'll send it to the repository function, which is add habit repo. Let's see if we already have it over here. Yeah, add habit repo, and we'll send it the ID that we have, the name that we have. So it will add the name object. Okay, so if it has added it successfully, then we'll redirect. If there is an error, then we'll respond that send resp dot message that will have an error. Okay, see. Okay, so add habit, and let's look at the router, which already has add habit. Have we got it over here? No. Okay, let's check this. Okay, so there is some error. So undefined. So request.body is coming as undefined. So there is a small thing that you have to do whenever you are using a form data. You have to use a middleware before that. And that middleware, it's very easy to Google if you get this very widely reported. So app.use this middleware where before getting any route, you have to use this. Okay, and what we use is Express URL encoded. Yes, and we'll pass it an object as extended equal to true. Let's see if it helps us get the, this will help us at least access the request.body object, which without it you cannot object or access it. Okay, So habit validation failed because path name is required. What's happening right now is name is not there, and one of the reason why it's happened is here in index.js file in the form we have to name what we want, and this is the name it looks for. Let me check name. Okay, let's see the error. Can't set headers after listening to client. Okay, let me put it in else. Might be. So we have the name jog, and we are redirecting it. Response.redirect. Okay, let me console.log. Okay, probably there was a duplicate error because we ran this twice. This is what I'm guessing. Let's see the error. But okay, response error. So yeah, we see it's a duplicate error. So you see this jogging too, and let's say cooking. Yeah, so it's getting added. And now if we go there, it's taking us. We can add. Okay. So we have created this app as of now, but it does look a bit like this does not look that good. And this, let's try to change it a bit and style it a bit. So let's start with having it in a table kind of a format. So again, I'll use Bootstrap for it. So Bootstrap table, and then let's select one of them. Okay, this looks good to me. So copy, and over here we'll paste it. So rather than having it in list, we are going to have it in table. So we can remove this, and this is the table that we have. We can remove some of the rows. We just need one row, and we'll be doing it dynamically, populating the rows. And the table dot body, this will be here. Every time we iterate, we'll add a new row to it. Okay, and we'll close the table and the body tag after we are done with it. So here, so we do not need this. We don't need this. What we'll need is the hobby name, and then the hobby streak. Okay, so how are we going to get hobby name? We have over here habits. Okay, let's look at the controller function for this. So this is giving us habits and to date, and habit is, let's look at the repository function, get all habit repo. It returns the habits. Okay, so let's go here in our index.js. Okay, hobby name, and this will be the hobby streak. This will be max streak, and later on if you want to add anything else, we'll do that. Okay, so for now let's keep it like this. And then the three things would be here is h dot name, and then h dot streak, and h dot max streak and streak. So this looks good. Also, rather than having this over here, now we can have this anchor tag over here. Remove this. Let's see how it looks. Okay, looks better. So we can remove this, and also next let's style this. So first of all, where is that anchor tag? Okay, we are removing this, and now let's think about styling the detail page. So over here, what we have is we have these buttons. Okay, we have this buttons which does not look that good. We can have a classier button than that. And okay, so let's start with button. So Bootstrap buttons. So these are the button classes that you have. So let's add this button rather. So you can just copy the class, and this will give you this. If you want to change it to this, then secondary. For danger, just change it to the danger. So I am sure you know the class. So this is two class over here, button class and button success class, and they are separated by a space. So two classes. So if we want to change the color, I think if we change it to danger, then it will change it to red. For now, we are using the primary color, which is this. Okay, so rather than this button, let's add a class to this button. Okay, so let's see, refresh it. Okay, nothing happened. Saved it. What's wrong with it? So we have a button class is this, button primary. Okay, let's, okay, so this is, okay, so the reason why it's not changing is because we do not have the bootstrap over here. So in ideal condition, we do not have it twice, rather we use template for it, whereas the header and all will be defined in the layout, and we just define the body. But right now we are not going into it, so we can have it over here, and this shall work. Okay, this is working. Okay, so by, it would be better if we had color or something like color coded. If not done, then red, done, green, and none, grayish kind of a thing, right? So how can we do that? Okay, let's try to do that. So for that, uh, we'll use some condition, right? So over here, the button is primary. The color changing would be, if we change it to secondary, it would be gray, and to danger, it would be red using the, okay. So this class button that we have, it should be based on a condition. We shouldn't give it directly, right? So let's write the condition over here in a, okay. So we'll say first we'll check the state of it. Okay, so if d dot state, the date dot state is equal to done, then in that case the class of it will be primary, which is green color. Okay, if it's not the case, then if d dot state equal to not done, then in that case the class should be equal to danger, which is red. Okay, and otherwise by default the class should be equal to gray. Okay, so for all the other cases, which is the only case we are left with, it shall be gray, and it will be secondary. Okay, so hopefully this should work. We'll close this. Let's see. Okay, so it's working. For none, it is this. For done, it is this. So if I'm changing over here, nothing is happening, right? Because on the client side, we haven't made any changes. So client side, we are not changing the class. The only thing, only while loading, it is changing. So when I load it again, so to fix that up, what we can do is when we are fetching the state and changing this, let's also change the class of it. Okay, and how can we change the class of it? So we have a function called button dot class name. So we can change the class name again over here when we are changing the state. So that we have it in the client side also. So this new state, okay, the state that we have over here, if the state is equal to done, if the state is equal to done, then change it to this. Otherwise, if this state is equal to not done, then change it to, we'll change it to danger. And by default, we'll change it to secondary. Yep. So this should work. Let's see if it works. So yeah, the color is changing right now. Now for this does not look that good, so we can change this as well. So we can have this days, and then we can have this part where the actual date is, and then we can have this none. So we can look for bootstrap cards. It wouldn't be that good, but it will be certainly better than this. Okay, so just trying to pick one out of it. So this looks good. Which one? Okay, let's pick this one. In the detail that we have, we'll have it over here. Okay, so first part will have the date, but we do not want the date like this, the entire date. How do we want it? We want to have the days of it, right? So to have convert it into day, we have a function called toLocal, toLocal date string, and we'll have to pass certain parameters to it. So one will be US format and the other would be weekday, which is important to pass. So weekday, we would want to have this weekday as short so that we have the abbreviations Monday, Tuesday, MON for Monday, TUE for Tuesday. So let's see if it works. And okay, before that, let's also change this. Here we just want to have the date, and to just have the date, we again need this. This time we'll not pass this weekday short. We'll just have it like this, and this will serve us the purpose. This will get us the date. Okay, and here we should have a button rather. Okay, to have the button, what we can do is we can get this button. So let's have the button as it is over here. Okay, so we have the button over here. We can get rid of this and this. Okay, so let's see. Okay, there's something wrong. To local date string is not a function. D dot date. Okay, why is it like that? Okay, so have we closed it? So D dot date to local. Okay, there's a E that we are missing over here. Let's see if it works. Okay, where is the problem? Has that not loaded? Have we not? Oh, we didn't save it. Okay, so it's looking slightly better, right? So we have this day, and there's no limit to styling it more. But let's stay with this forever, this for now, and let's also change this slightly better if we can make previous and next or something. Buttons. Okay. Okay. So let's keep like this, and we can add it over here. So we don't want this one too, and href is for previous, and this is for next. We can get rid of these. Let's see. Okay, not much of a change, but yeah, this takes us there. Okay, and probably the running should be above that, so this name should be coming before it. Also, do we have anything else over there? Okay, yeah, so still we have this. Okay, so yeah, we have styled it to certain extent. But right now, the streak is showing 0 for everything, and the max streak also. I think there's some issue with the streak and max streak. We'll try to. So now to fix the current streak, what I've done is I've created a new function which checks streaks. Every time we go and update our file, update the status of the habit, we'll have to call this function, which will return us the new current streak and the maximum streak. We pass the status array to this function, and what it does is it calculates the new streak and the max streak, and then we save it. How does it do it? So this is the function that we have. First of all, it sorts the array, the status array, in ascending order of the dates. So this is how it sorts it by the date. If the date difference between two consecutive days is greater than 1, then the streak becomes 0. Okay, we sort it in ascending order. So a comma b, a dot b date minus b dot date. If this is negative, this will take the first date. Okay, so if it is negative, this will only be negative if this is lesser than this, which is earlier. So a will be put before b. Okay, and then we define the current streak as 0, max streak as 0, and the previous date as null date. Then for the first time, the previous date would be null, and it will just check the status of it. If the status of the first date that we have in our array is done, then the current streak becomes 1, and the max streak is also updated. If we have a previous date, then we check the previous date and today's date difference. If it is greater than 1 day, difference between two date object is always reported in milliseconds. So we convert it into days by dividing it by this. If the date difference is greater than 1, then the console log, then the current streak becomes 0. Okay, and if the status of that day is done, then we increase the streak, max streak. Otherwise, if it is not done or none, then the it becomes 0. Then we update the previous day as the current day, and this is how it works. At the end, we return the current streak and the maximum streak. Over here, we get the current streak and the maximum streak. We set it to this and we save it, and this is how it is. So this is the entire change that we have made over here, and right now it's working fine. Okay. So now we have everything, but we don't have any option of deleting the hobby. Once created, it will always remain, right? So over here in this column, let's try to create a delete button or something like that, which would delete it. So first of all, let's try to create a route for it. And over here, we'll have router dot route, and let's call it delete. And this will delete habit. Let it be delete habit, and then we'll pass on the ID that has to be deleted. And we can have this as dot delete. Okay, and we'll pass it a handler. Okay, so delete habit. Let's try to create a controller over here. Export const delete habit async request response, and here we'll have the ID, and we'll wait for delete habit repo, and we'll pass it the ID. We'll wait for the response from here, and this function, let's create it over here. Export const repo, and this will be async, and we'll get the ID. And what we'll do is delete it by the ID. So await will fetch the habit. So for that, we have the habit model dot find by ID and delete. There's a function like that, and we'll pass the ID. Let's see. We'll return the response. Okay, we'll return this response dot JSON, and we can return. Okay, we'll see. We can return deleted. This will be message. Okay. Before that, let's try to create a delete button over here. We'll try to create a delete button just like we have the name, the streak, the max streak. We can have a button over here, which will be for deleting. And to do that, let me copy this button ID. Class danger. So this is something that we'll have, and this is not going to be the case. This button will be an anchor tag. Okay, let's see. So over here, So this is something that we have. Click on it. It's a get. Okay, first of all, it does not have anchor tag, can only give us get, so we can't use anchor tag over here. Secondly, let's fix this, where we should also have a header for this. And this is something that we have. We should also have something over here. So delete. So we can see this button. Now let's try to get the button working. So for now, what we want to, we do not want to go to a new request and reload the entire page. We'll use fetch AJAX method for it. So let's go there and let's add a on click event for all this. So on click of it, we want to delete the button. Okay, so we want to delete the habit. So delete habit. It should at least have one parameter, which is habit ID, that is needed. Okay, so to get the habit ID, we'll pass it in code and we'll close it. So this will get the habit ID, and now we can define this in our script. So let's write a script over here, just like we did for the toggle button. So let's define the function, which will be delete habit, and it will take the habit ID. And okay, first thing we need to do is look. Okay, we can check for a confirmation from the user once the use button is clicked. So if only if the user confirms, are you sure you want to delete? If the user confirms, then only we want to do this. Okay, so then we will send the response, we'll get the response, wait for fetch call. And how are we going to get the fetch call? So we have to give the fetch call to this. So backtick and dollar and habit ID will pass and close this. Okay, we'll fetch it, we'll also pass the method has to be delete. That's what we have made the route for. Okay, so it will be delete. And since it's this, so it has to be async function. And whatever response that we get, we'll have to get it into a response. We'll have to pass it into JSON. So we'll pass it into JSON. Okay. So okay, we can do a validation over here. If it was successful, then we can say it was deleted successful, something like that, or otherwise not that. Okay. So, but this is how it's going to look like. And finally, once we have it over here, we'll also want to remove the deleted item. So for that, we'll have to first make it unique, and that we can do it by giving it ID, and the ID can be simple, the habit ID over here. Okay. Now, next what we can do is we can get the element const habit element and document dot get element by ID backtick dollar h habit ID close, and this is the habit ID that we have. We can simply habit dot remove. So this will remove it. Let's see if it works. Okay, there are fewer h underscore ID is not defined. So where is it? Yeah, rightly so. Okay, so it's going for a get. Why? Because we have not removed it. Delete. Okay, so there's something wrong over here. Response is coming as null, and why so? So there was very minor mistake that we did. Instead of re response, we had written res, just that, and then we remove it. That's all. In alert, we do not. In case controller, this is how it is. Repository function, we are searching by ID. This is how it is. Okay, these are the changes that we have done. Let's see it working. So running, running two, delete. Okay, deleted, cancel, not deleted. Okay, so this is working. What else can we do is, rather than going back, we have to, if I go back, we cannot go back. So let's add a button, a minimal button over here. Okay, so let's take the button and add it over here somewhere. Okay, let it be habit tracker. Okay, this is the habit tracker that we have. On click, it will take us to there. Let's see if the class works over here. So button and button primary. Okay, probably a bit too big, but okay, works. So I think all the functionalities are there. So streak and all, everything is working. So now we can think of deploying it, adding it to Git, and yeah, so let's do that. To make the project deployable. So first step is to have an environment variable file. So let's create a .env file. So what is the use of .env file? When we are pushing it in production, we do not want our password and important details credential to go in, right? So we would want to keep this in .env file, and we'll separately provide it so that it's secure and it's not visible to anyone. Even for that matter, if we are pushing it into GitHub, we do not want the environment variables to be seen by other. Okay. So one of the things that we have over here is this. Eventually, we'll be storing it's right now in localhost, but to deploy it, we need it in online DB. We would need it. We would need a server for it, and let's start preparing for it. So we'll keep it in the .env file. So we'll call this db URL. Okay, so this is db URL and equal to, and this without quotes we put, and this is how we put it. Okay, mostly we get it all caps and no quotes is needed. Okay, over here what we need, we have to get the environment variable. To get environment variable, we have to have these two function. So which is .env. So first we'll need .env. So for that, first we need to install .env library. Okay, so now the thing is that whenever we want to have it, we'll have to have it at the top of the file in the index.js file. Okay, we do not need to import it anywhere else, just one place, but ensure that it's at the top, and then we'll have to configure it. So .env.config. So now we'll be able to access all the environment variable anywhere in a project. So over here, to access it, what we need to do is we need to pass it in takes. We'll write process dot env dot db URL. Okay, and this should work. Okay, forgot this and this. Okay, so we can test it if we are able to connect to DB or not. You can see connected to DB. So we are connected. So that's one of the thing that we wanted. This will have it stored in .env file. Also, we would want to initialize Git in this project. Okay. So we'll have everything in Git. So Git init. Okay, so Git has been initialized. Now you can see the sign has changed. Everything over here is, nothing is committed right now. Okay, so now we have this. Now let's create a file to let us know that Git don't back up. So Git has to ignore these files. Which are these files? We do not want the node modules to be imported because it's going to be a heavy file, and we can do this while we are deploying. Everything will be deployed as per our package.json file. It has the list of everything that we want to have, and the dependency like .env, we have installed EJS. So all the installation will be done on the server itself. We do not want to have this done by ourselves. Okay, so we are going to ignore it. So to git ignore this folder, we have this syntax, and to git ignore a file, we'll just write the name of the file, which is .env. We'll ignore this as well. So we'll save it. This will be ignored by our Git. Okay, so now what we want is we want to have a Git repository. So let's create a Git repository. We'll call this habit tracker. Okay, and we'll keep it public. For now, no readme file. And now we can follow this step. So first we can commit, and then we can point it to the branch. Then we can add the connection, the origin, and then we can push to it. Okay, so let's first add it, everything. Let's look at the Git status. So everything is there. Now Git commit message. Let's pass the message first commit. Okay, so everything has been committed. Now we need to do this thing. We need to first change the branch to main. And once it's done, we'll have to point it to the origin. We'll have to add the origin that we have the connection. So that is done. And now we can push. Okay, so we'll also have to do this. And this will update our, so now the Git has been updated, everything has been pushed to GitHub. Now what we need is, we'll need a online MongoDB server, right? This local host will not work. MongoDB online. Do is we can create a project over here. Project. And next. We can create a cluster. Okay, so we want to go for free cluster 0. So this will give you a password. We can copy it, create database user here. Now we can also change this. So allow anywhere access. This is it. So yeah, this is done. Choose a connection method. So you can choose this, and you can copy this. This will have the password, or so you can choose this. So in place of the password, you just need to put the password that you have. I'll show it for my, this is the password. So I'll keep it over here. In .env, replace this and have it. Okay. Now this is done. Now what we need to do is, our DB is done, so we need render.com. Connect with GitHub. Okay, so what you do is go to new project. We are going to select web services, build and deploy from here, click on next, then put the this, deploy it as public repository, continue, and branch main, root directory, and runtime node. Yes, build command will be npm install. Okay, and the start command will be node server. We want to choose for free, and here you can add the environment variable that you have, because the environment variable file is not going to be uploaded over here, so we'll add it over here. Okay, this is saved. Create web service. In the setting, so deploying it again. So build has been successful. Let's also change the port. So whenever we change any, we do a new commit, we can get the new commit and we can deploy it like this. And this is how it happens. It will build it again. So the build is complete. We can access it over here. Okay. So since it's a free instance, it will be slow, but things will work. So if we go back, it should be 3. Yeah, so it's working.